fundamentally about filmmaking, which is the film isn't really the final product. The final product is the meaning the audience makes when they perceive the film through the filter of their own lives, right?
I am Donita with Coverfly and Screencraft, and we are excited to speak to the writers of the newest Imaginary. This horror film was very captivating, and I think for me personally, it was so amazing because I love DeWanda Wise, and I think she was an amazing choice to
Who doesn't love DeWanda Wise?
Right? Like, she was just such a wonderful choice as the lead. So I'm really excited to dive in, and thank you guys for your time. I want to start off with the story. What was the inspiration from flipping this innocent story or folklore of having imaginary friends into something sinister?
What's funny, this is a thing that always goes back and forth with us and Jeff, because we both kind of remember it was our idea.
Success has many fathers.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, I mean, listen, I mean, which is kind of, I think, a testament to kind of how we all work together ultimately, that, kind of all the ideas became all our ideas over time, over the several years that we were kind of writing and developing this. But I think it really came from I will say that, from Jason's and I's kind of standpoint, kind of from, and I think it kind of maybe came from a different place with Jeff, but it kind of started from a place of like, imagine if there was an actual kind of a demon that was a kid was carrying around in his backpack, who was his imaginary friend, who ended up kind of, causing all kinds of havoc. And then it kind of developed through our conversations with Jeff, and kind of to becoming kind of something much more supernatural, and I think much more interesting and nuanced. But we just love the idea of that thing that every kid has becoming this instrument of terror.
Yeah, I mean, an explanatory myth is always a good thing. When you can take something that exists in the zeitgeist and offer some sort of explanation for it, but with your own unique twist, you're certainly onto something.
Yeah, that is especially true for your story. That's what I was going to ask as well. With my second question is, when it comes to like children and imaginary friends, and then the spirit world, I know there are a lot of folklore or like storytelling that says a lot of kids are close to the spirit world, or the spirit world likes to speak to children because of their innocence. So I want to know, did you derive, or did you get any of your ideas or with the screenwriting of the story from any ideas from books or folklores about kids in the spirit world?
I mean, I think certainly inspiration for large chunks of the movie come from books that we're all very familiar with: Lewis Carroll, Maurice Sendak, and certainly the aesthetic of the Never Ever comes from artwork like M.C. Escher. As far as specifically relationships between children and spirits, I mean, maybe you guys recall differently. My recollection is we kind of just wrote the story we wanted to write, and then there was a moment where the two of you did a little more research to kind of fill out Gloria's speech, but it was more of a kind of a retroactive bit of homework, as opposed to homework that we did up front to inspire the narrative.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Oh, I was just going to say, yeah, I mean, I Jeff's right. And part of that came from, I remember as a kid, when the movie Poltergeist came out, it kind of introduced this kind of new terminology for ghosts, which was, I had never heard the term poltergeist before. So working on this, we kind of retroactively did a little research on imaginary friends, and found out, terms like paracosm and things like that. So that's kind of, like Jeff said, it kind of came after the fact.
But yeah, it's interesting. I think that on top of that, the other interesting, I think, thing was it did start kind of initially as, oh, a kid and their imaginary friend, right? Which still is this movie is partially about, but kind of to your point of DeWanda and her character really became the center of the movie, right? That, kind of then came along as we talked about it more, and what is our way into this movie? And, and not only is it about a kid having an imaginary friend, but what about if you're grown up and, you lost touch with your imaginary friend, right? So, yeah.
I love that. I love that. And then, so I want to kind of take a pivot to the development of the script and then going to screen. What are some strategies that you guys did to develop the script together as a team writing? Because I know sometimes a lot of writers, they probably aren't really used to working in teams, or they don't really know how to work, collectively together. So what are some strategies that you did to develop this amazing script?
Well, I was mentored by Carlton Cuse on the TV side of things. He's the showrunner of Lost, and I worked with him on Bates Motel and The Strain. And on Bates, we had this sort of mini writer's room for the first 6 episodes. It was just me, Carlton, and Carrie Aaron from the morning show, who was technically the showrunner of Bates. And the 3 of us just broke the first 6 episodes together like it was a movie. And I really enjoyed that process. And so I've tried to emulate it on films when I've worked with other writers. I think that's what we kind of did on this one. And I think there's this misconception when you see 3 names on a script that like one person does a pass and the other person does a draft and the other person does their draft. And that's not really how we worked at all. It was very much a team effort, quite similar to, breaking a TV show.
Yeah, Jason and I have worked as partners for a long time, and I know Jeff has been in different partnerships also, and it's funny the way we worked on this very much mirrored, to Jeff's point, the way Jason and I worked together, which was we spent a lot of time at the beginning together in a room, getting sick of the way we talked and smelled. little room at Blumhouse. Well, that's not true. You were both sick of the way I smelled. In a little room in Blumhouse. Putting note cards on a wall, really just kind of going, okay, what is each scene of this thing, right? And kind of like, and hashing it out and moving the note cards along and adding one's ideas as they came up, and until you have kind of the structure of a story, and then kind of going away and kind of separately on our own kind of writing and handing stuff back and forth. Because really, I think, Jason and I found, I think very early on that if you are going to sit in a room together and actually write a script, some people can do it. We can't do it. And I think, you'd end up kind of, I don't really understand that way of doing things, of kind of each word and kind of typing each word. So, once we had that structure, we like went off and did our own thing and then kind of handed stuff back and forth, and it evolved that way.
Yeah, I love that. The great strategies though, to start, a little bit small and kind of branch out with the team always in the room, which is amazing. But I will say, in the storytelling, I did love how it kind of deconstructed the nuclear family, while also touching points on that with Jessica's background. Was it intentional to have Jessica with kind of like a broken nuclear family to then bring her back to her house to then try to create a new nuclear family? Like, how did that come about?
I mean, I think we always knew it was going to be about a blended family coming together. I don't think we ever had any version of the story that wasn't centered around that idea. To the extent that Jessica had her family broken apart in the past, I think we had a lot of different iterations of that. Like, what happened to her mom? What happened to her dad? I don't know if any of the iterations were too far afield of where we ended up. I mean, we've sort of marveled at the fact that we developed this for years and years, but kind of the core of it never really changed. And so, and I don't know if we ever really had a conversation about why we were making those choices about a blended family coming together. I think it just felt like the story that should be told.
Oh,
yeah, we needed a reason for Jessica to kind of need to confront her past, be forced to confront her past, and felt like that certainly was a good way into it.
I love that. And honestly, my favorite part of the film, This is a spoiler, so hopefully everyone would watch this, would watch Imaginary beforehand. But one of my favorite parts of the film was when they realized, well, when Jessica realized Chauncey was invisible the whole time. I audibly gasped in the film. I was like, what? Oh my gosh, we all got duped this whole time. I love that. That was my favorite part. So in that process of writing, were you always thinking of, okay, where's the switch? You know, we hear a lot about horror films. We always have to trick people or keep people on the edge of their seat. Is that early on in the process of you're thinking of how can we trick the audience into knowing what's real, what's fake?
No. No, I mean, that actually was a twist we kind of came up with kind of late in the game, if I remember correctly. There are a lot of discussions about Chauncey. Is he an imaginary friend or is he a stuffed animal? And then, one day it just kind of clicked into place. It's like, what if he's both? What if he's the stuffed animal that no one can see? And, and that to me, I always felt like that was just kind of a really fun moment of like, of course he's not real, right? The whole movie's called Imaginary. Everyone's saying he's an imaginary friend. No one's mentioning this toy. So it just kind of clicked into place kind of late in the game.
Yeah, I think it's a really fun aspect of writing, and especially draft and developing stuff is like the things kind of you stumble upon down the road seem inevitable in a certain way, and yet, sometimes they come late in the process, and all of a sudden the story shifts, or, and you can never see it coming. Yet it's at the end of the day, it always seems like, oh, how could it not have always been there? So
yeah, and for me as a writer director, a big part of my job is just getting the movie made, right? Like I'm just trying to get this movie to the point where we're on set shooting it. So I'm just willing it forward. And people kept saying like, well, is he imaginary or is he a stuffed bear? I don't understand. And I would say, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Don't think about it. We're making this movie. We're making this movie. We're making this movie. But inevitably, when you hear something enough, you have to deal with it. And honestly, I know we all like to take credit for each other's ideas. I can say with certainty, it was not my idea that the bear was imaginary. It might have come from Cooper. It might have come from you guys. I don't remember exactly, but I think you actually certainly executed the first version of that reveal and you nailed it on the first pass. And it is one of my favorite moments in the movie as well.
Yeah, that moment. Cool. Well, that brings me to my next question. Jeff, you talked about being a writer director. So for our multi-hyphenates that we come through our program, is there any advice that you can give for multi-hyphenates that are looking to gain momentum in this industry, but also kind of keep their creative essence in as a writer as well? Do you have any advice?
Yeah, don't be scared of working with other writers. I love working with talents like Greg and Jason because they make me better. They elevate the films that I will eventually direct. I have no problem directing something I didn't write. I also am happy to direct something I'm the only writer on. But truthfully, my favorite version is this, where I get to direct something where I did some writing, but I also had partners because I think the script is just better as a result.
Right. I love that. And is there anything from you guys' perspective that you've noticed while developing this film that filmmakers or even screenwriters should avoid in this process, like taking it from script to screen?
Ooh, that's a good one.
Anything screenwriters should avoid when taking something from script to screen?
Yeah, in that process of development.
I mean, unless you have access to an actor like Piper Braun, don't make your second lead a 10-year-old. Right? Kids and animals are tricky to.
I'll say, one thing I'll say is to remain open to any and all suggestions up until, the movie's starting to get shot. Because I know that we still had a few notes that came in, up until basically the movie started shooting, and there were a couple that I was, when you hear them, you kind of go, do we need to do this? But they worked out well, and so I just think it's a good thing to just kind of, even when you think, all right, I've written, 1,000 drafts of the script, and I don't want to hear any more notes. sometimes you just get that perspective on things where you go, oh, actually, yeah, I could use one or two more notes.
That's why it's so great to have collaborators too, because I think you can sort of, I don't know, the hat of annoyance, can only really be worn by one person at a time. So I would get annoyed by a note, or Greg would get annoyed by a note, or Jason would get annoyed by a note. But inevitably, the other people would be like, well, let's just talk about, you know what I mean? And it kind of gets you off your, what would we call in film school, the unfair chair, when you feel like, I don't want to do this note. Like you're just sitting on the unfair chair, like, this is unfair. This note is stupid. And so having collaborators just kind of talk it out with you, where there's no ego, there was no sense of like, well, I'm the boss, so I'm going to do this, or, this is our vision, so we're going to do it that way. The three of us, I think, just always kind of accepted joint custody of this thing. So it was very easy to talk about ideas and find a way.
It's cliche advice, but I think, it's always kind of hearing the spirit of the note as opposed to the note itself, right? So it's, you can't tell how many times, we have walked away, not necessarily in this process, but just in general as writers, and go, oh, that no, and what? And then you start to think about it, as Jeff said, and you go, well, actually, wait a minute, that's what you made to think about something else. And, the good news on this one was I think we had a kind of a fourth partner in a Blumhouse executive over there named Cooper Samuelson, who actually gave some very smart notes and helped to kind of shape this thing. But yeah, always be open, I think is good. And only work with talented 8-year-olds. Those are the two takeaways.
Oh yeah, she was magnificent as well. Really
magnificent.
Brought you into like feeling so connected, and I just felt like, like she was magnificent in that role. And well, this might be another spoiler. So the way that it ended, is there going to be an imaginary 2? Was it a cliffhanger there?
I mean, look, if you plan for a sequel while you're making it a movie, that's the best way to make sure you never have a sequel. So what I tell, any film students that I'm talking to or other writers that are looking for words of wisdom, I always say, put all your ideas in the movie you're working on. And if there's an appetite for a sequel, you'll come up with more ideas.
That is very true. I love that. And well, this is actually personal to me. I still can't figure it out. What did that flower on the wall mean? That was on the corner of the door. What did it mean? Because I still, after watching it, I went back and read through everything, and I'm like, I'm still lost. I don't understand.
I mean, honestly, it wasn't even scripted as a flower. I think it was scripted as like a child-like sticker, maybe.
Yep.
Oh.
Yep.
So the flower, I just, you get shown options when you're making a movie and you're making a million decisions a day as a director. And I think I was just shown a bunch of options, and I liked that one because I thought it was striking. The contrast between the yellow and the blue, you'd be able to tag it quickly, but it wasn't so like specific that you were like, well, that's a little weird, right? Like if it was like a, like a chipmunk in a baseball uniform, you'd be like, well, why? Whereas just the smiling flower, it felt generic enough that you wouldn't ask too many whys, although clearly you did. So maybe I failed in that moment. It's funny. I didn't think it would be so loaded, but when you see it for the first time in the basement, it resonates, I think, a lot because of the dream sequence. And it's this idea that we're going to be blending, realities. I think it's kind of declared very clearly in that moment with that visual reference.
Yeah,
that is a really interesting thing about taking it from script to screen and what Jeff did with it, because I think it was just it was a throwaway thing of like, I think it actually came pretty late in the script. It's such a small thing of a million things you put in a script, right? Of like, but just, I think it was really, the idea was just something to differentiate the door from other doors. It's like, there's a childlike sticker on there. It kind of speaks of childhood, speaks of innocence. It's innocent, and yet there's darkness behind it, right? And evil behind it, right? So all those things. And then, Jeff just found the perfect image. And like, I mean, there are moments where you just linger on that thing. He did such a great job of it. And it becomes this much bigger thing than just a little line in the script, which is interesting.
That is so cool. Yeah, no, I love that, because that could be like an Easter egg for something else later on. You never know.
Well, also, it's what you're talking about is an example of something that I believe fundamentally about filmmaking, which is the film isn't really the final product. The final product is the meaning the audience makes when they perceive the film through the filter of their own lives, right? So what we're really trying to make are the feelings and thoughts that you, the audience, have after you see the film, and you are an active participant in that process. So the fact that that sticker meant something more to you, that you were meditating on it, that you were thinking about it, that's actually the kind of thing that I'm after, and that excites me. And I'm so thrilled that you had that reaction.
Yeah, I was really intrigued by that. So, well, with that being said, with the storyline, Jessica's past, all of that, is there any type of strategies you guys use to kind of have social commentary, or like the family dynamic, to weave that into the story and into the screenwriting? Were there any strategies you use for that?
I mean, when it comes to social commentary, I think as long as you're telling truthful stories about authentic characters, that you're inevitably going to offer some sort of comment or some sort of editorial on the human experience. Like, how can you not? And I think that's sort of how we might have arrived at any sort of social commentary about trauma or family or blended families through this film. It wasn't a mission. It was more sort of a wonderful byproduct of just trying to tell a story that filled with authentic characters.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And raising kids is scary enough, enough. And then you throw in an evil teddy bear.
Right. That's trying to eat everyone. And speaking of Chauncey, the bear, was his structure, like his face and all of that, that was intentional to like make his face kind of lopsided a little bit? That was in the script before it went to the screen?
Well, the asymmetry in his face, interestingly enough, was kind of based on a note from James Wan. We were trying to design the bear. Atomic Monster and Blumhouse were in the middle of kind of coming together, merging. Mm-hmm. And we were talking about what Chauncey was going to look like. And it was a really iterative process. We'd done dozens and dozens of different versions, and I was keenly aware that he couldn't look like Annabelle, because what kid would want to cuddle with an Annabelle version of teddy bear? And I was also kind of worried that he was going to look too much like Paddington or Winnie the Pooh, and then be like, well, this isn't creepy, so that didn't work. I wasn't really sure what the answer was, and it was James Wan who sent me a note through Cooper that we should focus on the asymmetry of him, that would create an unsettled feeling in the audience without making him too overtly demonic, where you wouldn't believe a kid would want to play with him.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I think remember in the early days, we were kind of passing around pictures of much kind of more kind of creepy, kind of, or at least kind of superficially creepy, kind of older antique bears. And it was the fact that it's so close to being this adorable bear, and yet, just as to Jeff's point, a little bit off in an unsettling way, is so much more powerful.
I love that. I bet that was really creepy looking through antique bears.
That's the hero bear.
Oh, really? Wow. Yeah, I'm like that. That sounds very creepy. Also, I do love like all of the tropes. I've noticed a little bit of the tropes of like, don't look under the bed, and that whole scene with DeWanda Wise, like in that room. I actually had to look away a little bit because I got a little scared. But that was it was amazing. I really enjoyed myself watching this film. So I always like to ask before I let my interviewees go, what are you excited about in this industry, or whatever you want to kind of announce that you're working on, or are you excited about, the way that the horror industry is going, if you want to give any of that away?
Definitely. Yeah.
I mean, I can say, I'm working on a project about Van Halen right now that I'm super excited about, the rock band. As far as horror, I've got several ideas that I'm developing with Blumhouse. If it's up to me, I'll work for Jason Blum for the rest of my career. Right, Jason?
Yeah, I mean, we're doing a competing Van Halen project.
We're doing the Gary Sharon project.
The first time we talked about it. No, I mean, Jason and I, it's funny, we kind of bounce between, kind of more 4-quadrant kind of family stuff and animation and other 4-quadrant stuff and now horror, kind of, this is kind of one of our, first, we've always been huge, long-time fans of horror as we were kids, but this is kind of one of the first things we've worked on. And so now we're kind of working on things that are in both worlds. It's almost this kind of, this really bifurcated career we've got going, but we're having fun doing it.
But yeah, but I love working in different spaces. I'm sure the same way you two do. To me, it's like being a chef. Like, what chef only wants to make French food for their entire career? I mean, it's horrible. Like, the fun is to dip into different genres, identify like what makes that genre work, what are the audience's expectations, and then how can you give them what they want, but also offer your own unique riff, your unique spin on that space.
That's right. I mean, it was like, Roald Dahl, right? Is together, except for kids and stuff for adults. And it was, you want to have that kind of career where you can do all kinds of stuff. Neil Gaiman's another guy that comes to mind.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So yeah, if we could only be so lucky.
Yeah, Ian Fleming, come on. James Bond and Chitty Chitty Bang Bang.
One of my favorites. Oh my gosh. Well, thank you so much for your time. I'm a huge fan of all of you. I love Bates Motel. That was my jam. I binged it the whole series. And obviously Greg and Jason love, The Princess and the Frog. Love that. Are you kidding me? That's the greatest animation of all. So huge fans.
You got the poster. Oh, can you see it?
Oh, nice. I love that. Oh my God. One of my favorites. And just thank you so much for your time today. And I hope that, you guys continue to let us know what else you have going on so we can get you back and interview you again with whatever you're working on. But thank you so much for your time. This is amazing.
Thank you. Really.
Thank you for your time. That was great.